talks about this proclamation because, and it's an interesting one here, because this proclamation was targeting Maori who lived in the Manukau district, right up to Mangere Bridge, right up to including the Shimata and so on. So from, if you like, from the Mangatawhiri stream up to Mangere Bridge, that area, that's Wedge, that's Manukau City. And he wanted them to take the oath of allegiance to Queen Victoria, and he wanted to surrender their weapons, and if they didn't do that, he asked them to retire across the Mangatawhiri stream into the Waikato or face being expelled. We'll expel you if you don't go voluntarily. And Grey warned that those who held arms and threatened settlers would also forfeit their land. And that's in that proclamation, ultimatum really, delivered on the July the 9th. Now, a lot of the books don't talk about this, but I've done a lot of digging over this over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and on July the 2nd, he issued a second proclamation, and in this one, he claimed that Maori were assembling in armbands on the other side of the Mangatawhiri, in the Waikato proper. But of course, what happened was that he'd already said to some people north of the Mangatawhiri stream, if you don't sign this oath of allegiance, you should go south of the Mangatawhiri, and he'd already created the rebels that way anyway. So it's quite interesting, you know. He was quite...
He's counting them twice.
He was nasty, you know. And he reckons that, interesting this use of the word down here, because you know that the Waikato River starts at Lake Taupo and actually goes downhill to Port Waikato. So from our point of view as Aucklanders, we look down to the Waikato and we think, well, it's down the Waikato. But actually the real down is going from Lake Taupo off the central volcanic plateau and down to Port Waikato. And that's why the language I've used here is down, because they're saying down the river. The river is flowing towards Port Waikato, you know. And that's the threats they were saying. They felt that Maori were going to come and ravage Auckland. And again, he issued this, and I think this, and I'll say it in the next slide, is almost a retrospective justification for him to attack the Waikato. And I'm telling you why it's retrospective is because he issued it on the 11th of July, and just like the gestation of correspondence going to England, it's very much a micro version of that in here, because a lot of the Maori never got that second proclamation. Because you think if he attacks on the 12th of July, they'd have to be going very quick, have to be a bloody good fax, come email, getting the information out tomorrow, letting them know that if you attack us, we're going to attack you. It's just pretty nasty, you know. And those Maori who had refused to sign the first proclamation moved across the Mangatawhiri stream. They're now going to be labelled rebels. So he's right if he's saying some people are going to be rebels, because they are. And there were 600 of them who'd upped and gone, I'm not signing the bloody oath of allegiance. I'm not going to sign it to the Queen. I'm going to just go down and join the Kingitanga. Interestingly enough, teaching at Only Home Hospice, it's interesting that their marae, when the marae got set up, the affiliation of the marae is actually to Tainui and Ngāti Whātua. You naturally think it's in Auckland, so it's Ngāti Whātua. But in fact, Tainui, the upreaches of Tainui go, in fact, they claim Mount Wellington, and they also claim parts of Mangere are tie into there. And in fact, the marae at Mangere Bridge has got ties to Ngāti Whātua and Tainui as well. So Tainui, which is the Waikato tribe, goes right up to Mangere, to the Manukau Harbour at Manukau. And I say that move by him was truly a retrospective move. It's interesting, we go past these areas, so if we're driving down south today, Martin's Farm is on the Great South Road, and it says a little signpost on the thing, if you drive on the Great South Road, it says Martin's Farm, and we just live right about over here. So we're right at the top of the Bombay Hills, if you like, you know. And there's a road up there called Razorback Road. There was a redoubt up there as well, because you know it's so hilly. So it looks right out on the Waikato, so it's a primo position really. So, right, now let's just look at the two forces that are armed at this stage here. British force pretty formidable really. They had 14,000 men. These are paid soldiers, and of course you've got that other thing where they offered to pay them in land that they take as a result of the war. They offered to give them land holdings, and if you was an officer you got a little bit more, and if you're just an ordinary Oik soldier then you got less. But they knew they were going to take the land so they could offer it to them as a reward. And there are a few pro-British Queenites. In other words, that when you say Queenite, they're saying Queen Victoria. They supported Queen Victoria. I've got a book at home called Kupapa. It's those Maori who fought on the side of the British during the wars of the 19th century. Quite interesting actually. But about 18,000 men over the course of the war, led by Cameron of course, and they were very well prepared, and of course they had their infrastructure set in place, they had their supply lines set up and so on, and they also had breech loading rifles. I thought that not many of the rifles actually had rifling in them. What rifling is inside the barrel of a rifle, it's actually twisted so that whatever the bullet or whatever is in there comes out spinning. But if it's a musket, they're smooth and they just splay out anywhere. They're notoriously inaccurate. But rifling meant that a rifle could be much more accurate because it's you notice those people throwing the javelin, they flick it with their finger at the last minute and it gets the javelin spinning, and that's what goes through the air so beautifully, because it's the spin that cuts through the air better. Same with, and the breech loading, of course, they break the gun in half and load it that way rather than muzzle loading, which is what Maori had. So Maori they had double-barreled shotguns and they had muskets, but they didn't have very many, only the breech loading rifles that they'd actually stolen when they've had a battle and got some from that way. And they were part-time warriors. They could be there for a battle and then they had to go back and tend the crops and so on, do the usual things that they have to do. They weren't full-time warriors, they were fighting for their land, fighting for their, at this stage for Kingitunga of course, so that was quite an interesting scenario. The two sides were really largely mismatched. So the first battle started when they crossed the Mongatawhiri stream at Koroa, and they did it pretty quickly, and then he kind of paused. Cameron's paused for about 3 months, and in that pause time, Maori built up a defensive fortification at Meremere, and Cameron got enough men assembled to go and actually have a go at Meremere, and when he got up to try and attack it, the Maori just vacated it, they deserted it. And that's a technique that they use all the time. They create fortifications for an engagement and then they vacate it after they fought them for a little bit. So they're trying to slow them up. They don't have to do any more than kind of slow them up really, because the whole Waikato War is about staging posts. It's Koroa, Meremere, Rangariri, as we'll see in a minute or two. And then of course he had the advantage of having the ships out on the in the Waikato River as well, and that was quite good. So there's Meremere, about 1,500 men constructed a pa, but they were overwhelmed and they retreated from the pa. They escaped. There's the Pioneer opposite Meremere, bombarding it from the shores of the Waikato River, and it also was used for moving troops as well, so they could be picked up from Alexandra and Tuakau, moved just not very far along the Waikato River and up to Meremere, and boom, do its job over there. And what they often did apparently is they would actually have other little ships that would be towing barges, and the soldiers would be on the barges and they would tow them further past the site, and then they would come back and attack from the other side. So that certainly happened at Rangariri, which is this one. This is actually quite a good map that demonstrates that whole thing. There's the Waikato River, and then just around the corner there is Alexandra Redoubt, and of course Pocono's not far away as well. And there's Mary Mary's redoubt up there on the hill overlooking the Waikato River, and there's the Pioneer and the Avon. It's another little steamship. You know, they call it, if it says PS in front of a ship, like PS Rangaroo, means it's a paddle steamer, means paddle steamer, you know, as HMS, His Majesty's ship's a proper ship battleship, you know.